in this last online regional by Top Cut Events. Today I was playing the Yellow Nova. It was really fun to play. I was just kind of tired of playing QQ in this format. The deck's really good. I think it's probably the best deck still. I mean, it won the event today, but I just was so bored of playing it. So I wanted to play a deck that has a good matchup into it and is still a good deck on its own while still being fun to play. So Yellow Nova got scratched my yellow itch. So my matchups today, I actually lost. My only loss was round one to SS4 Goku Xeno. That deck was so dang fast. He killed me while I was on 2 energy, and I didn't make the necessary deck build choices or combo choices in my game to give me the win. But he definitely crushed me. So my first round was SS4 Goku Xeno, followed by a Namek and then a Red Gohanks, and then a U7 Yellow, followed by another Namek, then SS4 Vegito Black, and then finally in the last round at table two, I faced off versus Red Kidku, which is like the boogeyman of the format. So congratulations to my teammate Robbie for winning the event, and let's go ahead and pop on into this deck list. So we played the 4-star ball leader slash Nova leader. Since this is our first time doing this deck profile on this channel, we'll go ahead and give a full rundown of the deck. 4-star ball leader can't attack on the front side. It's activate main that allows you to switch it to rest mode, and then you can put a yellow card into your Z energy and top 5 for any Shadow Dragon card. This is really cool. Yellow Shadow Dragon cards, sorry. This is really cool because it makes it so your leader doesn't have to attack in matchups like SS4 Vegito. If they go first, you can just choose not to attack, or you don't have to attack to get your value. And then it makes it a little harder for them to awaken next turn, especially if you hold something like Time Magic up. So you might buy another turn like that. Also, you do get to create Z energy without being at risk to Broly Omen of Evolution or peel off, so it's really cool. But obviously at the risk of not gaining a card out of your deck. You're actually just going net neutral for this. And then its awaken condition is at 4 or less life, or if you control a 1-drop Z yellow Z unison card, which is really cool. When you awaken, you untap itself and the leader, and then you play the Z extra associated with this card, and you go down to 6 life. On the backside, he's kind of a Yu-Gi-Oh card. He's got 3 effects. His auto is once per turn, either player's turn. When you combo with a yellow card, you can draw a card, so that's really cool. His activate main slash battle is once per turn. You can put a 2 Z energy into the drop and choose one of your cards with EX Evolve and switch it back to active mode. It specifically shows up one of your Shadow Dragons, of course. And then finally, his other activate battle is for 1 energy. You can choose 1 Shadow Dragon card in your combo area with a power of 1, so you choose a ball, and then you play the associated name with an energy cost of 4 from your hand or drop with its skills negated for the game. So that just gets you into your evolves in case you couldn't like float into them normally. It's really high value leader. There are definitely a couple different ways to build it. As a control player myself, I built it very control oriented. A lot of the games I was, if I didn't already have the tempo lead, I was just stalling out until I could finally stabilize the game and then kill my opponent. Some games did end pretty early, and then some games lasted till like turn 5 or 6. The deck gets incredibly powerful, like almost too powerful the more energy you have access to. So as you get into those later turns, turns 5 and turn 6, it's really hard to defend against everything the deck has to offer. Plus it's always drawing cards on both players' turns, so your hand gets really big. So starting from the main deck, we'll start with our openers. We play 2 copies of Ice and 4 copies of the negative energy 1-star ball. When you're mulliganing, this is like the only card you're really looking for in the mulligan. If you see the SCR, this is like the only deck I consider keeping the SCR in, because your turn 1 play is really not that important in this deck. You can actually get around it, and I'll go over some of those lines later. But if you do open it in your opening hand, I typically just keep the hand, even if I'm not like hard mulligan for the SCR, but I'm saying like if you see the SCR, you probably just keep the hand. But this is your opening play. You'll tap 1, play this card, or you'll ideally activate Ice to play this card from the deck just to thin your deck by 1. We are playing a full 60 count deck. We were just drawing ourselves to death too easily. And then if you open both a ball and the Ice, I would actually activate the Ice to play a ball from the deck and then use the ball as the Z charge for your leader skill. And we'll go over some of those lines to explain why. The Ice literally just lets you play a ball from the deck with its skills negated for the turn, and the ball, it's a really old card. For 1 energy activate main, you can play a 4-drop Syn Shenron from the deck. So our primary choice for that is the Cold-Hearted Shadow Dragon. Barrier, blocker, deflect can negate a skill. Especially if you're going second, this is typically the card you want to ball into. If you're going first, that might not be the truth, and depending on the matchup, you might choose not to go into this. Even versus green, I typically side one out because it's really not that great. But it's typically just a standard good Syn Shenron card. It's cool that you get to play it off the ball straight from the deck, and you don't have to commit the 2 energy to it. But you are still committing 2 energy because you're still like you're playing the ball 1 energy earlier, like a turn earlier, and then you're going into the 4 drop, and then you don't get the draw. So it has also niche applications versus like SCRs later in the game. If you have multiple energy you keep up, and sometimes you just can't do enough on your turn, so you will just pass with a lot of energy up. The secondary choice for the ball is the Syn Shenron Shadow Dragon Leader. It allows you to choose your opponent's one of your opponent's rest mode battle cards or leaders, and then that card can't attack next turn. If your opponent awakens their leader, it's a different card, so they can attack. But and I had a couple opponents who did not know that. But I'm not going to correct my opponents on that, and I wouldn't if I were you either in a competitive setting. Sure, when you're testing your buddies, you should learn that together. But if you're playing against someone like Kid Ku or Vegito that really wants to get that extra draw and you don't feel like you're going to lose this card on their turn two, you can go ahead and just ball into this. Also, if this card gets removed by a skill, you get to draw a card and replace itself with a ball, whereas the Cold Hearted Shadow Dragon doesn't get to do that. In matchups where you definitely know you're going to go into the Nyx Syn Shenron up, this is probably better just because you're going to fly away from it anyway. Most of the time, these cards are energy if you draw them. I play a full playset of the 9-drop Syn Shenron Destruction Incarnate. This card's still just as much of a behemoth as it used to be, especially because it's not expected in this current format, right? So this card is Blocker Revenge, which is really already really good. And then it's got an auto. Whenever your opponent plays a battle card, you can choose that card, ignoring barrier, and negate its skills for the turn. So your opponent will definitely get their pending autos, but then any activate mains or any other skills on that card are gone. Plus, in this game, if a card has its skills negated for the turn, you can't add skills to that card anymore. So they can't gain blocker in the Namaku deck, which is super relevant. And then if this card's ever KO'd or removed by a skill, you get to draw 2 cards and then play up to one-star ball from your drop. So it just recurs its value, which is good because it's kind of a -2 to make this play every time you make it. We're not worried about dead drawing this hand because this card into our hand because our unison can put extra copies of this underneath the Z extra, and then it just becomes a free 10k combo, which is super useful into red matchups that are not Kid Ku, because then like that fulfills the requirement for explosive dance really easily. Our second ball that we play is 4 copies of negative energy 4-star ball. This ball's really just here to fulfill the auto effect on the Z extra, and then when your Nova 8-drop inevitably gets removed by a skill because it's a 30k, not going to die by battle, it lets you play this ball from the drop. So you just get a free 5k combo back after it goes away. One of the main cards of the deck, this 4-drop Super Saiyan Son Goku, Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku versus Nova Shenron Fierce Clash. That's quite a mouthful of a name. It's a dual attack blocker. The way you play it is activate main for 1. If you have 3 more energy and you control a yellow unison, you can play this card from your hand or from underneath your Z extra. That's an activate main or battle. That ability is really strong because you can do it on your opponent's turn, and then you get a blocker. You can do it on your turn without having to be in battle to keep getting value. Its auto is really powerful too. When this card is played, you get to choose one of your opponent's unisons or battle cards and tap it. So it's just like Power the Super Saiyan in 1 card. So that's really effective when you're like passing with a bunch of energy to your opponent's turn because they maybe they floodgated you out or you couldn't really afford to do a bunch of plays on your turn. Like now you have this extra battle trick on your opponent's turn. And then of course the upper dragon for that we evolve on top of that is this Nova Shenron energizing I don't know, blazing, I don't know these names. Blazing something meteor, right? This card is nuts. For its EX evolve cost, you just have to pay 1, and then as part of the cost, you draw 2 cards and you just evolve it on top of a Nova Shenron, which of course this card is. There is a line to actually play this card on turn 2 if you choose to be a more aggressive line and attack 3 times with it. But I personally prefer going into the 9-drop on turn 2. When this card attacks, it's auto once per turn. The first time it attacks, it's going to check to try to KO one of your opponent's battle cards. And if that card is in rest mode, this card restands. And then, of course, when this card leaves the field by a skill or is KO'd, it lets you play the 1-star ball back, which just gives you a 5k combo. So like when you go into this line, you're cycling, you're seeing 3 new cards because you're drawing a card from playing this from underneath your Z extra, and then you draw 2 cards for evolving this on top of it, right? Plus you probably got an attack with this, so you remove the card from your opponent's hand or you dealt the damage, and then you got to draw 2 new cards and attack twice, and then your leader skill can put 2 Z energy in the drop to restand it one more time because it is an EX evolve, and then you attack again. So those are some of the really neat tricks with this deck. And speaking of that effect to restand an EX evolve, like sometimes you can like block with this, trigger the revenge, or just if your opponent's trying to get a leader swing in, you'll just block, just to chump block the leader, and your opponent, your opponent forces you in that situation where you want to spend the 2Z to restand it or not to block another attack. But getting able to block twice with this card in a turn is really powerful from a controls perspective. So that's pretty much our core of the deck. The 9-drops come out when you're playing versus stuff like Red Kidku, or you're playing against any deck that can just really clear the 9-drop for free. But it's really a really good tool versus like Go Hanks, Majin Buu, green decks in general. Some black decks, then they have to go and remove it first, and they don't get the full value of their cards. It's not great into Kidku because it is a 30k and they just play their 5-drop and they kill it for free, and then they still hit you with 2 damage. So like you just did a bunch to do nothing. You know what I'm saying? Our follow-on plays Omega Shenron, allies absorbed. So I misplayed this in my tournament today. I apologize to my 6th round opponent. I've been testing all month with this deck, and I've just been sacrificing the 8-drop Omega. But to play this card, activate main, pay 1, choose one of your Shadow Dragon cards with energy cost of 4 or less, and place it in the drop. And then you can play this card draw a card and play this card from your hand. That's really powerful. Um, typically, you're going to use a ball that came back from the drop because one of your Novas died, or you have a 1-star ball that came back from the drop because of your 9-drop died. So typically those are the targets you send away. And it has this secondary activate main where you can choose one of your Shadow Dragon cards with the energy cost between 2 and 4 and banish it from the grave. Then you may take up to 1 life. After that, you gain all the text on the card it copies. So prime targets for that card include this Nova Shenron. It has to be a non-Shadow Dragon or Syn Shenron card too. So you can copy this Nova to gain dual attack blocker. There's an Oceanus in the deck, so you can gain barrier blocker and KO, tap a card / KO a 2 or less, and you can also copy the Hey Shenron that you'll be seeing to gain double strike for this card. Play this card at 2, it really is like a super late game tool, like turn 4 and beyond, maybe turn 5 that you're really going to play this card. Otherwise, it doesn't really come up. One of the prime finishers for the deck, definitely Omega Shenron, the ultimate Shadow Dragon. He's a 1 energy, warp 7 Shadow Dragons from your drop as part of his cost to play this card. And he draws a card on play, which is insane. He did not need to draw a card. He's got triple strike and unique, and then at that point he's just a triple strike, man. So a lot of times on like turn 3 or 4, especially if you're catching your opponent lacking, you can just create this card and kill your opponent from 3 life. And then of course they're all 8-drops that you're seeing except for the 9-drop. So you can play the newest Shadow Dragon to the roster, SS4 Gogeta versus Omega Shenron, clash of something, something, something. If your opponent has 3 more energy, when you successor this card, limit 1. So successor, you put an 8 in the drop, any of these 8s, or 2 4s in the drop, so like Nova, or like this together as a 4. You put those targets in the drop and you get to play this card, and if your opponent has 3 more energy, you can choose one of 2 modes. The first mode is typically the one chosen where you get to discard, your opponent discards 2 cards and then he gains double strike. Or the second mode, if your opponent has some really sticky barrier cards, because yellow doesn't really have good barrier removal except for this card, you can choose up to 2 your opponent's rest mode battle cards that ignoring barrier and KO them. And then he gains dual attack, which is equally efficient sometimes because you can attack, pull a negate, and then leave him active for blocker. Moving into some of the techier choices for the deck, I mean, Oceanus is not that techy. I kind of hate it for the deck. In testing, I was milling my SCR a lot, so I brought this card down to 2. It's really only activated if you don't have a Nova and you really need to find a Nova, or like if you really need to find the 8-drop, because it searches every Shadow Dragon in your deck except for the 9-drop. You're kind of relying on drawing into that, or your leader skill on the front side to use that card effect. So the Oceanus, like I said, you risk milling some key cards when you activate it, so unless you really need to find a Nova, I wouldn't use the Oceanus. Most of the times I end up charging it or tucking it underneath the Z extra, or Z charging it a combo. It's just an extra Shadow Dragon name most of the time. 3 copies of Hey Shenron, one of the best reasons to play this deck. Hey Shenron has an auto. When this card is comboed with or attacks, you can discard a Shadow Dragon from your hand, and if you do, you can KO one of your opponent's rest mode battle cards with an energy cost higher than its energy. So that's really big for like early SCRs that come down, like Cumber or Beast Han. This card really keeps those cards in check. Also, just super early pressure that doesn't have barrier is a good way to keep it in check. Really great as a 3 drop or as a 3 of. You kind of just hold it so your opponent can't really get through. Like let's say something like early game, you like chose to block with this card and they super comboed on a 6 drop, and they're like, oh, they're gonna kill your 30k because they need to get rid of it to play. Well, then you just haze behind it and kill the 6 drop and don't spend all that combo power. That's a perfect transition to our defense. We can play a couple copies of Bardock, Heritage of a Legend. This card's actually not amazing. It's good to see on turn 2, but if the deck really wants to kill you, it'll kill you. And you didn't draw that many cards in your early game, so you really have to hope the rest of the cards you drew were amazing. It is convenient that it's a 4 drop, so you can successor away if it lives to your turn. But like it has no protection, it's only a 20k versus like every color that can probably clear it before it makes it back to your turn. Much better card. That says Vegeta Overwhelming Might. It's a blocker and it's a counterplay, so it doesn't do much if your opponent already has a pre-established board. But what it does do for you is that your opponent has to start tapping cards to keep attacking, right? As long as it's not their leader attack, and that's really good because it plays into your SCR. So even early or mid to late game, this card really does buy you a turn, if not sets up your kill. A couple copies of Time Magic for that sparking defense. Not really a big fan of Yellow's version of the testing deposition. I think it's like Frieza's army reinforcements. That card can't be comboed with, and at least Time Magic can prevent cards from restanding, like the Vegito barrier blocker guy. He can also stop like the ground shaking Fury from restanding, which is a lot better than just negating and creating a weird blocker. 2 copies of Nimbus. It's yellow. It's Nimbus. I probably will play a couple more or change out the Bardock for some Forbidden Powers. Just because we are super weak in the early game of the game. So having access to extra Nimbuses or extra Floodgates that are hard Floodgates and actually hard stop a turn might be what pulls us out of the early game. For my super combo, it's just 4 copies of the Hercule. You maintain 2 Z in this deck almost always. You're creating a Z on both players' turn, always. Once on your turn, once your opponent's. You create 2 Z as you awaken. Like, you create 2 Z after the turn you awaken. So you always meet the requirements to super combo with this card. The only thing is if you're playing the deck and you're new to this super combo, just make sure you're tracking that super combo. Like, make sure you super combo before you use the Activate Battle if you're planning to use the Activate Battle to put 2 Z energy in the drop. It's also nice that like you can sit at 5 or 6 life and still triple strike your opponent to death because of this super combo. 2 copies of Koitsukai in the main. 1, it makes it easy to side. 2, Koitsukai is just good versus everything right now. Black, yellow, red, blue, and green. Like I keep Koitsukai versus everything except green, I think, because Homicidal Clone's like the only card they play on your turn, plus like Charismatic Villain. That's not very useful, but like black, they have 4 copies of their counterplay. They have 4 support of the Dark Empires. That's huge. They even have that Gohan. That Gohan SGR. Blue obviously plays a bunch on your turn between defending friends and the Majin Buu. Red Kidku loves playing on your turn, so if you Koitsukai, you can just go crazy on them. Yellow is probably the other color that I don't really play Koitsukai into. They have a couple things they can play on turn. I mean, they're not inclined to play the Frieza Army Reinforcement, so Koitsukai is a little worse in that matchup, and like Robotic Riposte kind of has gone by the wayside. Plus, if you're Koitsukai trading for like a Bardock or an Overwhelming Might, you're not really getting that much value because they'll probably just Nimbus instead on that turn. Then you just lost the mana for your Koitsukai. My overwhelming choice is Secret Identity Black Mass Saiyan. It's just for Kidku. I mean, I operate under the belief that Kidku is the unequivocal best deck of the format. Therefore, Secret Identity is the counter overarm to Kidku. So, ergo, we play Secret Identity. It could be anything that you choose. If you're choosing a super aggro route, you could choose the Bardock Awaken Instincts to draw 2, discard 1. You could choose the Vegeta that just warps a card on play. You can choose the Vegeta that warps a card out of your opponent's hand. You can choose the Toa that has your opponent discard a card and give your leader 5k for the turn. There's a lot of options for your overwhelm, but this is one I found the best. You don't want to overwhelm too much in this deck because you do need 7 dragons in the drop to be able to play this card. So overwhelming like super late game before you play the Omega could be a challenge, depending on how much of the energy you have stuffed up. 1 copy of Dragon Thunder. It's a bean versus most decks. Honestly, versus most decks it comes out. It's really just in this deck for Kidku and then decks that go super wide and low to the ground. If you're 3 or more rested yellow energy, you can just activate this for free and bean your leader. But more importantly, If you do pay the 1 energy for it, you can choose any card in the battle area and negate its skills for the turn. So that includes Z extras. So when like Kid is relying on the waters to save them for those 2 life, like let's say they have waters out and then they have 3 life left, you can play the Omega Triple Striker, attack your opponent's leader, start dumping, and then Dragon Thunder the water so they can't gain those 2 life back. Same if they have the other Z extra and they're relying on the 40k combo from that one Z extra, you can just Dragon Thunder it away and they can't get it back. That's really neat. 1 copy of Absolute Annihilation. I call this the U7 combo. 1 copy of the U7 Goku and the Gogeta SCR. So these are just game finishers, right? Like versus red and green, this card's insane. I kind of take it out versus black and yellow, and I haven't played against blue because it's kind of been missing in the format. But versus red and green, which are 2 of the biggest colors in the format, this card just slams at those colors. They can't play their explosive dances, dormants, or uneasing awakened rages without having to pay an extra energy. And then a lot of those decks rely on their testing the oppositions and homicidal clones, so they also need to switch an energy to rest mode when they want to activate those cards. So being able to shut that down with this card is great. You do, like I said earlier, you generate an insane amount of Z energy in this deck. So by the time it's like turn 5 or 6, you typically have anywhere between 4 and 12 Z energy left in the Z deck. I mean, you don't really do much with your Z deck. You'll see that. So this card can come down for 4 or 5 attackers, especially if it's the last card you play for your turn. Like you have 1 energy left, your opponent's tapped out, they got a couple life left, and you're like, man, do I pass a turn and defend with this 1 Nimbus in my hand, or do I slam this quintuple attacker down and try to end the game that way? So that's a really good way to do that, obviously. And as for the SCR, your SCR in this deck could be anything. Like if you don't have a Gogeta, you could play Picklehan, you could play Shenron. I think those are both fine choices. You could even play Celzino, right? But I wanted to go for the SCR that had the most impact in the game. So I'll talk about some of the combos you can do with this SCR as we get into the extra deck. But this SCR, most of my games, like I said, I was milling the SCR in testing, so I was winning slash losing without the SCR anyway. So I wanted to, if the SCR was going to be a factor, I wanted to straight up win the game for me when it came down. And all day, whenever I did get to resolve this SCR, I won the game. You get to effectively take an extra turn and a half when you play this SCR. What I mean by that is like by the time you're slamming this card, you're typically getting 8 or 9 energy out of it. Your opponent has a bunch of cards rested. Maybe you baited them into resting a lot of their attackers with your overwhelming might and your Goku and just tapping stuff down. They don't really understand what's going on. And then finally, when it goes back to your turn, you slam down this SCR. You get like 9 extra energy, and then you proceed to win the game from there. So with that, we'll go into the Z deck because the Z deck plays a big part in how this deck works. Well, here's all my energy markers for the SCR. For the Z deck, we play 4 copies of this Z Unison. I would play 6 if I legally could. This deck requires a Unison to function for its main plays. That being said, if you're playing against this deck, you just keep sniping down the Unison, eventually you will win the game. So it's a 1/1 Unison, right? Its auto is when a player attacks, you may choose to combo with a card from underneath your Z extra. And if you do, negate this skill for the turn. So you don't have to do it on the first attack. It'll trigger the auto each time, and then only once you actually combo with the card will it negate the skill. And then it's +1. It's actually really useful. You get to put a yellow Shadow Dragon card underneath your Z extra and draw a card. Then this card gains 5k for a turn cycle, meaning it's a 10k attacker. And then it's just a 15k attack on your turn because when you attack with it, you can use the auto to combo from underneath your Z extra and make it a 15k. Ideally, your choices for putting underneath your Z extra with this card's effect include this 10k combo, this 4k that can be played from underneath, and this 10k combo, right? That way you get free 10k combos out of these and they're not just dead bricks in your hand. But obviously you'll take whatever you can get. But if you can manipulate your turn so that you're putting a key card underneath, then that would be super helpful. What I mean by that is like maybe you can attack with leader first, get the draw off the comboing, and then maybe you draw into one of these 3 cards. So you can put it underneath your Z extra. And of course that synergizes with your leader because when any player attacks, right? So when your opponent attacks, you're going to trigger the auto. Even if they attack the unison, you're going to trigger the auto to combo from underneath, and then your leader will draw a card. Being able to combo from underneath means you can combo these 10Ks for free, these 30k attackers, so that when they go into the Z, you can use them for explosive dance later. Super cool. We'll talk about the Z extra. You can only include 1 copy of this card in your deck. It's the 7 Shadow Dragons assembled card. It's actually a dang shame that this card doesn't come in foil, because it's all the 7 Shadow Dragons, right? And I'm not even a Shadow Dragon fan, but this card looks so cool. So it's a 1/1 Z extra, which is relevant in other decks. In this deck, you get to play the Z extra for free when you awaken. It's auto when played. You take up to 7 Dragon Balls, like 7 of these balls, from your deck and/or drop and place it underneath this Z extra, and then that's all it does, which is huge because then it gives you 7 cards you can combo with right away, up to 7 cards you can combo with right away from your autos from this Z Unison, right? Its activate main is actually huge and part of the reason why we're playing the Gogeta SCR. So its activate main allows you to tap 4 energy to tap up to 2 cards on your opponent's side of the field. So if your opponent passes to you with anything less than 4 energy, so they have 3 or less energy, they're probably dying that turn, right? Because you can and they have a bunch of cards tapped. You can play the Gogeta, get it like 8 or 9 energy, right? Play the Absolute Annihilation for 3 of those 8 or 9 energy, and then for 4 of those 8 or 9 energy, you tap out the rest of their energy, maybe tap them down to 1. Even at 1 energy, they can't use Explosive Dance unless they have the energy marker, so that's huge. And then under the Annihilation, right? And then you can try to Quad Strike them, which most people have a secondary plan for. If they don't, you can just dump on the Quad Strike and kill them. But if they do and they survive the Quad Strike, then you have your multiple attacker coming in to finish off the game. Sometimes you have even more energy to play with, and you can like go into an Omega, that's a triple attack. You can go into this, which is technically a quadruple attack because you'll attack once with the Nova, EX Evolve it, attack twice with this, and then restand it with the leader skill to attack it again. So like once you play the Gogeta, it's just way too many uninteractable huge attacks that close out the game. Of course, he has an activate main that like lets you board wipe, which sometimes comes up because you can clear markers with it, but like you're probably never gonna do that. The rest of the Z deck, pretty uninspiring. We have a backup unison in case we go through all 4 of our unisons. Chose this unison also because it doubles as a unison to beat out Cooler. So it's a 2/1 unison. If your leaders or you choose up one of your Shadow Dragon cards, cost of 8 or less, and give it barrier for the turn. So it's really cool if you give this barrier versus Cooler. Cooler has a limited amount of barrier ignoring mill cards. So this is a cool way to try to punch through Cooler. Also, it's a +1 for 2 energy, and it's 20k. Your opponent's is probably not going to waste attacks into it by the time you have to play this, right? Because you're going to play one of these per turn starting on turn 2. So 2, 3, 4, 5. Like by the time you play this, it's probably turn 6. And so you by that point, your opponent's not going to attack this card anymore. Its -1 also is beneficial versus Cooler. You can choose one of your warped or dropped Shadow Dragons and put it at the bottom of your deck, which is a really neat way to just refill your deck versus that annoying deck. So that's why we chose it as our backup unison. 2 copies of Hey Shenron. So Hey Shenron's is a 1/2 battle card for 15k. On play and on attack, he taps one of your opponent's battle cards in unison. Super good for getting around blockers or just setting up your Gogeta SCR. And then on auto limit 1 if your opponent or when you combo with a yellow Shadow Dragon card, he can take any Shadow Dragon card from the drop and place it right back underneath the Z extra. So that allows you to recycle your Novas. That allows you to recycle your Megas for the 10k combo power. Super cool. If this card stays on the field and doesn't get checked, like you're just getting free advantage out of this card. And for the last 2 cards, just barrier removal Vegeta, which I never played, an SSB Evolve Son Goku Defender, just for like if you got floodgated out, you can play this card. In theory, it's a barrier attacker versus Cooler, which I also never played. I played like these 7 cards all day. Right, I didn't use any of these 3. We tried Oolong, but Oolong's just so irrelevant in this format, it just never came up. Something to note if you're playing against Kidku and testing, you're like, dang, I just keep getting sniped out for my unison. If you're playing against Kidku, you might have to make the judgment call and cast this card for 2 energy to get 2 markers on it, so it just doesn't automatically die to Chaozu. That's a huge, huge judgment player call. That's the Z deck. Actually, while we're on the Z deck, we can talk about how to play the game if you don't open the 1-star ball. So when you play the Z and you awakening, you're gonna have a bunch of these balls underneath, right? So if you really need to, when you go to attack, you're gonna have 2 energy up. You're gonna attack with your unison or something. You'll combo the ball. You can use your leader's activate battle to play this 4-drop Syn from your drop or your hand, and then with its skills negated, and then that's one of your 2 energy. And then after that battle, you can EX evolve it into the 9-drop. That's how you can get around without having to open the ball in your hand. And of course, the same line happens. Same line's possible if you combo the Nova and you just happen to have this card in your drop. You can play the Nova, and then you can just EX evolve into this Nova and go for some pressure if you want. It's obviously not the preferred line because you have to tap 2 energy to go into this line, but it's just a way to get out of like if you did not open ideal, right? So we talked a lot about Syn Shenron and all the cards. Finally, let's quickly go over the side deck, which will probably be different for the next format as the anniversary box is coming out by the time you guys see this video. Got 3 Sun Gohan's Trusted Ally, just hand control hate. It's a yellow card, it's free. You don't have to worry about it. I mean, I didn't get hit by any hand control today, but it's also good versus 21 in case you need a negate. 1 Hunt for green decks / Gogeta. 1 Mutaido for green decks, really to hit Father Son Kamehameha, but the 9 drop also just hits Father Son Solidarity, not Kamehameha, sorry. 1 copy of Son Goku Steadfast Assistance for the U7 matchup in case they're playing the Victory Strike SCR. I mean, it costs you nothing to hold a 5k in your hand, just in the off chance that they're playing that SCR. 2 copies of Release from Evil for the SS4 Vegito matchup. You can freeze down the SS4 Vegito barrier blocker card, and then hopefully when it gets back to your turn, you can play your Omega 8-drop that has Successor and KO that card in rest mode. That's really useful. You always have a Unison out, so this card's always free. 1 copy of Koitsukai Mechanical Courage, strictly for Cooler. I actually don't bring this card in versus, like this third Koitsukai in versus like Kid Ku or anything. This is strictly in case you run into Cooler. Even though we're playing a 60 card deck, we do reduce our deck count really quick. Like I'm decking out by turn 6 really often. So this is just another way to aid against Cooler. Another copy of Absolute Annihilation for those green and red decks. 3 copies of Grade 8 Baby Golden Rage for red Kid Ku. Maybe Blue Teen Gohan if you see it, I guess. 1 copy of Tyrannical Blow, also for red Kid Ku to hit the Videl, Chaozu / Bulma if you need to. It also is really good versus like blue decks, so that when they go to play Defending Friends, it doesn't hurt you as badly. Has some very niche matchups as well. And then an extra copy of Dragon Thunder for, you guessed it, Kid Ku. It's just so when they decide to overextend, going into our turn 5, we can tap 3 for Annihilation. If they're just leaving the 1 energy up, hoping it saves them with Explosive, and they have the Waters. You can tap 3 for Annihilator, 1 for the Omega to make it to play a triple strike, and then you can attack your opponent, and then Thunder their Waters and go and dump it on the triple strike to kill them. That's the entire, I guess, 75 card list. I guess, I don't know, it's probably more than that. I'm bad at math because you have a Z deck and then you have your leader. This deck is super fun to play. I really enjoy playing this and testing. It really just rewards player skill. Like, you have so many tools and tricks that your opponent just has to play around them all. You're not just relying on a floodgate. I mean, the floodgates help, but you have so many tricks behind the floodgate, right? Like, you have free combo, free Z energy. You have Hey Shenron to snipe things out. You have ways to tap down your opponent, even if they think they've set up a good defense. It's really cool. I implore you to try out the deck. It's definitely not as bad as everybody thought it would be. Thank you to Brian Samuel for figuring that out for us and paving the road for us to work on his deck and improve. Shout out to my team. We played our best today. We all got creamed by the same SS4 Goku guy, which is actually really funny. Except for Robbie. He went on to win the event with his red-yellow Kid Ku deck list. I hope you guys are excited to see that deck list. It's going to be freaking awesome. Shout out to you guys who hung out with me in the stream today. It was really fun talking to you guys, answering some questions, getting to know you guys as usual. I'm really excited to see the guys I see in Dallas, and then to those store championships that I'll be attending. I'm really excited to see you guys there as well. And I'll catch you guys next time.